So this parsha this week, and I know Nelson asked me once to give the numbers, so I'm very dutifully going to say that Shemot, Exodus 30, I've been starting, is PT.
PT South, right?
PT. And when I looked at it, I said, oh my, you know what? I don't want to talk anymore about Kayakayo. I don't need any more of the golden calf.
It's funny you looked in here.
Thank you. Don't feel my. What else is in there? My philosophy, and you know what? It's impossible not to mention it, but we're not going to focus on that faith, that sin at all. Yes, it's an important pivotal part. And I don't want you to think that I don't know it's in there. I don't even mention it, but we're not going to go there. The way that I always look at Torah is that it has to speak to me today, and it's a success. It's not, there's nothing wrong with doing an intellectual exercise. There's nothing wrong with recalling and sharing things that we've learned prior and new idea and old and new ideas. But if I don't leave here with something a little bit different, something, even if it's one sentence, then it wasn't for me a good experience. That's me. Maybe you guys feel differently. So I wanted to speak for what I consider to be not, here we go again, the golden calf, but as Ryan just said, there's a lot in this parsha. And not only is there a lot in this parsha, and I'm not an expert, but I've never prepared for a class where there's so much commentary, so much on so many things, and so disparate and so contradictory and all of that. The good news is there was no way that I could work my way through all of this. And the good news is I'm not gonna subject you to, you know, all of this as well. But the other thing is, and I feel that I have some very knowledgeable people on this Zoom who kind of, whether you agree or you disagree, let me share that this is my class right now, so I have to give my opinion, which is some of the things that I basically always thought from my childhood were Mitzvah are midrash. There's so much midrash on this particular thing. And one of the things that I learned, and it doesn't mean that it's not important, it doesn't mean that it's not fact, but it does mean that it's a different level from what I understood. So therefore, I'm going to share an example of that, and we're not going to really delve into it, as I've always learned, and maybe you guys did too, that the women did not contribute gold to the building of the thing that we're not going to mention, the camp. That is very well promulgated all over the place, and that's a belief. But it's midrash. It's not. And basically, you know, our own says have everybody, including have everybody donate something. And there's nothing until you look into the midrash that the women were exempt. The reason that's important is because from that teaching stems a lot of other things, mostly positive about women in Torah. And I know that, or maybe you know that I like to at some point interject some feminine perspective in some of the things that we teach. But that is one of the midrashim that is so very well known that we might not make the distinction that it's not in the book specifically in those particular words. So today, I'd like to focus on what speaks to me. And the first thing I'd like to talk about are those Israelites. I'm going to mention the building of the golden calf. Why did they do it?
They were impatient.
They were impatient. Thank you for the brevity. I love answers.
They were
Get to
used
the
to
point,
it.
yes.
They were used to having an idol or something. You need something
They
concrete.
wanted something tangible.
They needed an intermediate to God. Moses was not there, so they needed an intermediate.
They needed intermediary. Okay. Yes,
Could they have lost faith?
thank you. I mean, in my view, and if this is me speaking, and I am definitely an expert in my opinion, they got a bad rap for this because there's this question, the challenge of holding God close and keeping fear at bay. And this speaks to me, and I'm being very personal right now, but I'm going through some heavy medical stuff right now. And this is a question that is constantly with me. keeping fear at bay and holding God close. So I said I'm going to focus something to me with the sincere hope that they speak to you as well, and this would be one of them. I'd like to share with you a pretty brief poem on this. It's titled The Other Side of the Story. Already so many changes. Our long column of refugees snaking into the wilderness through the sandal-sucking mud where the waters had been. Their men and horses consumed. And then that voice speaking directly to us, reverberating in our hearts. But Moshe ascended by himself into the sky, and he didn't come back. Of course, we asked Aaron to make us something to remind us that we weren't as alone as we felt. I'm going to be sympathetic. This is my choice to B'nai Israel in relating to this. And I asked myself, if I were there, what would I have thought? Having said that, I think all of the answers that have been offered are totally valid and certainly a part of this. And we're talking about different people, so some of them may have had different motivations. But there's a lot of things that I would suggest that we should not rush to judgment, because it's very much in style to talk about the sin of the golden calf and the rebellion of the people. And yes, I can certainly argue that, but I'm really choosing not to, for my understanding of this. There's another part of this, which is these people actually had a concrete relationship with God. For them, God wasn't only an idea, it was real. It was a Lord that had protected them, had killed their enemies and saved them from peril in the crossing of the Sea of Reeds. And they had seen the actions of God with their eyes, not just in their minds or theoretically. And when they were in danger, even the simplest servant could perceive a level of godliness. Okay,
Cheryl.
even more so, yes?
My problem with we assume that everybody saw everything. If there were really 600,000, and that's the men of fighting age, which means there was probably 2 million,
Right.
there's no way everybody saw it.
I don't know
No
that
one
they
was close enough to see it.
see to
Here,
feel,
here,
hear, see,
here on the
sensory.
second, third, fourth hand, maybe they didn't really believe right from the beginning.
I am in no position to.
I just wanted to
argue. No,
point that out.
I think that, yeah.
You know, when it says that
And
Moses gathered everybody and spoke to him, there's no way.
And the confusing commentaries that I spare you from reading unless you choose to, but that I look at, basically said that there were only about 3,000 involved in the construction of the idol. Of all of these.
Well, that's how many were
multitudes,
killed with
you know.
3,000.
Well, but.
Yeah,
But-
but the Drush say it was the Arab Ravs.
Right, exactly. So at any rate, I just wanted to go back to this for a minute, that, so God was, I relate to this again, as I told you, this is my pleasure to listen to my opinion, that God was real to them and she was gone. The other thing that, like Esther mentioned, is that Moshe was their bridge to God. Now, in today's world, we don't really think Jews do not need an intermediary, whereas other religions do. But still, that was a validation that was constantly in their presence, the presence of Moshe. But suddenly what happened? So he went missing. And so all of a sudden there's a panic. And they probably, their heart started racing. They had to do their meditation and deep breathing and everything, and that didn't work. So let's do something tangible. And we know, and we think that they knew, because the law had been given already, not to create idols, that it was against Jewish law to build a graven image. But when you look back, we should do more than just judge what they did. We should consider what led them to that kind of desperation.
Cheryl?
Yes.
I don't know if anybody knows it, Jerry might know. They were in Egypt, okay? Where did they see all these idols? They were not in the middle. I mean, the Egyptians, I don't think would have allowed them to go into their temples. They were busy working. How did they have time? You know, even in America, we don't go into church. I mean, it's not because we don't want to. We just don't think
The
of
idea
it.
of having something tangible is probably a human need, and certainly they
Yeah.
were not sheltered, and I can't say that they were barred from anything. I was not there.
And I said, I don't
Very
know.
possible
I'm
that
just
the
curious.
idols were in people's houses, and I mean, it was not just a fish, you had to go somewhere. Yes, please, Larry.
I'm wondering if the panic was compounded because they were so close to God.
That's my, thank you. That's exactly
Because
my
They
suggestion.
had seen,
Didn't hear you.
their panic was compounded because they were so close to God. They had seen, the plagues, the Red Sea, everything else. It was a constant, and all of a sudden that was missing. Yes, Moshe was the bridge, as you mentioned,
Mhm.
but they were so used to being taken care of and being so close to God, all of a sudden maybe they felt a separation, and that kind of compounded their fear.
I think you're studying it better than I did, which is exactly, if you've had that direct contact experience, there's probably there's a probability, there's a greater degree of panic going in, because that reality's gone.
I'm wondering if it wasn't the faith in God that they lost, but they lost the faith that Moshe would return. It wasn't the faith in God, because they still wanted a God.
I hear you. Jerry, you have your hand up?
Yeah, and to Sheila's question, that's really interesting. They were predominantly in the catacombs where they buried their dead, and in government offices, the depictions of the animals whom they believed were gods, but they were also strewn about the city, so they would have had some contact. It occurred to me though today, I don't know for the first time, but for the first time in a while, we typically look at this from the position of the people, their loss of faith and their need for something tangible, and they're missing Moshe. I'm wondering what it felt like from Moshe's position. We so typically look at it from the position of the people, and that's right. But leaders also need faith, and leaders also need a sense of partnership. So often leaders have the people until they don't. They have their respect and their following and their trust until they don't. So Moshe coming down from the mountain, I think part of the anger was, really, you guys, I've been there for you through thick and thin. I've been God's intermediary. I've put my life on the line, and my brothers and my sisters. And this isn't just how you repay God. This is frankly how you repay me. And we have to remember how we have to treat our leaders as much as our leaders have to remember to treat the people.
Thank you, Larry. I see, I'm going to ask for sort of a little bit of brevity, but please keep your mind. Jackie and then David, and then I'm going to go on.
Yes, the idea that the Bnei Israel didn't see idols, didn't have time. In Egypt, household idols were very common, and even the Jews did have little household idols that they could hold in their hands. So they were very common, and the archaeologists find them all the time.
Absolutely, and this was before the receiving of the commandment as well. David.
So just to add a little more emphasis to both what Jackie and Jerry said, one of the things we seem to be aware of is at least some of the Israelites are capable of working in gold and linen and other materials artistically. Perhaps they were even some of the people who were actually making the idols for the Egyptians. Whether they were or not, Jerry's quite correct that the idols, if you will, were in public all over the place, not just inside the temples. And do you have examples of that all over ancient Egypt now, even though it's in a state of ruin. The other thing I'm going to add, and this is my last point on this, is I think some of this has to do with perception of time. It seems to me that from Moshe's point of view, and perhaps from God's point of view outside of time or beyond time, but even Moshe's point of view, time bound, time is flying by pretty quickly while you're trying to learn the whole Torah up there in 40 days or what have you. Whereas for the people, the 40 days must seem like 4,000 years. Where is he? Yesterday, I wasn't worried. Today, I'm a little worried. Tomorrow, I'm going to be a lot worried. And if you've got people like Korach, et cetera, still running around in the group saying, you know what, maybe he's not coming back at all.
Thank you. I'm
Might be
sorry.
by that.
I look at it a little bit differently.
Now-
Jerry says that Moses was angry. I'm kind of thinking that Moses broke the first tablets as a way of gaining time to give the people a chance to repent.
Okay,
And
Esther,
that's the
sorry.
way I look at it, because buying time is something that's very important. And even Aaron, who was, in my opinion, not a good leader, still maybe he was trying to buy time.
Esther, I'm going to ask you, please allow me to recognize you before you speak, because I just recognized someone else. And
Okay, sorry.
please mute yourself. Thank you. Please mute. Okay, thank you. All right, Nelson, is it short? Otherwise, I want to say something. Move on. Nelson?
Well, I think there are two aspects of the idol that I think somehow we're focusing on the gold calf. Why a calf, and what did it represent to the people?
Yeah.
Was it a representation for God, or was it an alternative God?
I'm going to answer that, not with necessarily the right answer, but an answer. And I want to get, again, my desire, and I know it's tough, and this is very much understood segues into the idol, but I wanted to talk about people, their reaction, their humanity, and focus on that part more. I just wanted to share with you that some of the later commentators become much more charitable towards B'nai Israel in certain things. And two comments that stuck out. One I kind of don't relate to, but it was that it wasn't a God that they were seeking, but they were, somebody sort of touched on that. But they wanted something to remind them of Moshe, that intermediary. Moshe was a concrete presence, so they put another concrete presence. This is the stand-in, this is the proxy until he comes down. That's one commentary that was more than once seen in different iterations. Other one was, and this is the one that kind of is that, what do we do today? We build a shul. We need a place, we need a something. They weren't going to build a synagogue, but they needed a something. And the something that all of us have understood is something like what we would call a pesel, an idol.
Yeah.
But in their mind, it was the logical representation of something that was their place to go. Yes.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because remember, the Israelites have been given explicit and detailed instructions for building the Mishkan.
It's still going on.
Okay, they haven't built it yet.
Correct.
Because the golden calf intervenes in between. Later, they build it, but the whole idea of a partnership, of doing something, they're gonna be building, basically space for God, a space for God, but something that they're doing, something that will change them, because they're taking initiative rather than being acted upon. Okay, it's like the difference between, the concept, the awakening from heaven and awakening from below. Okay, when it comes just from God, it can change nature. It's a miracle. It can be a miracle, but it's only lasts momentarily. It doesn't change the person. They forget. It doesn't, but when they build something, when they fought against the Amalekites for the first time,
I'm sorry.
right?
We need to move
Okay,
on.
it made a difference.
Agreed. Okay, so maybe there's a new thought in there, and I'm still digesting that thought of it, was they were basically building what we would consider today to be a synagogue, but just, it was kind of interesting. One more psychological thing, and we're gonna move on to something different. So Moses said to Aaron when he came down, "What did this people do to you that you have brought such great sin upon them?" Aaron said, "Let not my Lord be enraged. You know that this people is bent on evil. They said to me, 'Make us a god to lead us.' For that man Moses, who brought us from the land of Egypt, we cannot tell what has happened to him. So I said to them, 'Whoever has gold, take it off.' They gave it to me, and I hurled it into the fire, and out came a calf." This is my question. Is Aaron a wimp? Or is
It
Aaron a
depends on whether
leader?
you believe the midrash about her.
Right?
If you
Okay,
believe
so
that,
remind folks
if
about
you
her,
believe
because I
that
don't.
midrash, then Aaron wasn't a wimp. He was
Remind
taking
me,
his
say
love.
one sentence, what is the midrash for?
The
people who don't know?
midrash is that Hurst tried to stop them and he got killed. But it's a midrash.
Right,
So if you believe that midrash, then Aaron wasn't such a wimp.
okay,
He was confronted by
And
rebellion.
and
You
you also
confronted by
have to point out that the calf, according to the story that we have, the calf came out of the fire all by itself. He
Right,
didn't
that's
really
it.
do
Okay,
anything.
yeah, okay. Esther?
Well, if I don't think he was a whim, or God would not have chosen him as the chief Kohen.
Okay, that's, I hear you. Anyone else? Jerry?
Suggesting that or wondering if he's a wimp, it might be seeing leadership only through one set of eyes, Moses or Nachshon. There are lots of different types of leaders, and Aaron could have been a different type of leader. Miriam was a different type of leader. The guy we never heard of was a different kind of leader who stepped foot into the Sea of Reeds after Nachshon. So it's too narrow if we think of leadership in only one way.
Okay, so one of the things that we can think about is comparing, what we think, generally speaking, the byline on our own is that he was a sort of a great peacemaker. And maybe in this case, he was preoccupied with preserving either his own well-being or his popularity. These are the negative possibilities in this thing. But one of the things that I think is a valid thing is to look at his leadership in this particular case and comparing it with Moshe's style of leadership. Moshe the next day said to the people, "You've been guilty of a great sin, yet I'm going to go up to Hashem, and perhaps I may win forgiveness for your sin." So Aaron's leadership style, at least in my read and my understanding, and we can convince ourselves if we, speak long enough about many different iterations of this, but on the basics, is Aaron's leadership style is really contrasted in a stark way with Moshe. Moshe is humble, but he stands up to the challenge. And it seems like Aaron was quick to say yes to appease, to not rock the boat, so to speak. And the other thing is that he says these are terrible people, and Aaron is, and Moshe, what's he doing? He's saying, I'm going to try to, I see their merit, they're worth saving, and I'm going to try
He's looking for
looking for the good and looking also to proactively fix what happened. Yes.
Question, at this particular point, was Aaron already the high priest or a priest, or was he still just Moshe's mouthpiece?
I think not, not a Kohen. No. Jerry, can you help me?
No, he had.
Debbie and I were talking a little bit. They're also both the archetypes of two completely different leadership forms in Judaism, priest and prophet. And then later on, we'll get judges and kings. But priests and prophets were completely different. Priests came from a certain lineage. They had to dress a certain way. Their prayers were, had to come at a very specific time. Prophets could be rich and poor. They could say what they want. They could dress the way they wanted. So it's a completely different form, and we need both. We need the priest and we need the prophet. We need the king and we need the judge.
Question was he already a priest? Was he
Was he already assigned to
Can I
just Moshe's?
make a comment on that?
Okay, he's not gonna answer. Okay.
If we go back to Truma,
Truma, okay.
okay, they talk about the clothing for the priests, the
Uh-huh.
role of the priest. I mean, remember Moses was not even mentioned for the first time. I think it was that parsha. And, you know, all of the accoutrements of the priest and
Okay,
and
but let me-
their sons and so
It was a
forth.
simple question, we'll try to.
So the answer is yes.
Okay, excuse me, all right,
Yeah.
my reading is that it's theoretical at that point, it's the plan, but if it's not official, but that is just, again, me talking. I just wanted to share with you that other midrashim basically excuse Aaron's behavior with many, many different rationalizations. And that one of them was that he was buying time for Moshe to come down, that he thought it would take a longer time to have the idol to be constructed, for the gold to be donated, all those kinds of things. But it's just a thought that it's not instinctive necessarily for all of us to buy into the most common what's the word I want? Explanation for his actions, just like everything else. There are many sides to the story, and in my view, looking at his psychology maybe can teach us a little bit about situations that we're in ourselves, and hopefully some of us can relate to some of these things.
Well, Rabbi Sachs really looks at it as a separation of power between Moses and Aaron.
Topic today, so thank you. Yes, these are all correct, but I want to stay on what our class is. And I'm going to move on again to something that, interestingly enough, the focus always, at least in my experience, is on what we've been just talking about. But there's an extremely important thing that happens in this parsha. And that is that the Torah segues to the topic of Shabbat. If I were to choose something that was relevant to my life to take away from this parsha, it's not about the death, it's about Shabbat. And I thought that each of us might want to look at it today in perhaps a different way than we have in the past. Some of this is old, but there's certainly every time an opportunity to look at something new. And I would hope that there are some thoughts that can carry off today that will resonate with you. So this is for the sake of us all being on the same page. Let me read you this line from Shemot in English. You must keep my Shabbat, for this is a sign between me and you throughout the ages, to know that I have consecrated you, the Israelite people, shall keep the Shabbat, observing the Shabbat throughout the ages as a covenant for all time. The Greek olam. It shall be a sign for all time between me and you. For in 6 days, God made heaven and earth, and on the seventh, God ceased from work and was refreshed. I actually hate that translation. I don't know why I chose it. Not a good one. But at any rate, there is a midrash that says that way back in Egypt, Moshe went to Pharaoh and said, you're going to get more productivity from the slaves if you give them 1 day of rest. So this actual mitzvah coming later is kind of a validation of that idea and a validation of Moshe's, and a validation of Moshe in a way, bigger than the idea itself, but that well, not bigger, but equal to the idea. But also by inserting the concept of the Shabbat immediately prior, it still has, the Mishkan still, as somebody who pointed out, it's not been built. The Torah is demanding that the people accept the Shabbat. And it's not just a utilitarian day of rest. It's something kind of more than a Jewish Sunday. It's a sign, oti leolam, a sign forever between me and my people. Now I'd like to do a quick word association. Let's take ourselves to March, what is today, 11 or something like that, 2023. Each of you, when you hear the word Shabbat, word association, what comes to you personally in your head?
Rest.
Rest.
Rest plus a deeper understanding of what life is all about.
Okay.
We think about
Contemplation
this
of life. Thank you.
concept.
I think a kodesh needs to be separated.
Habdil. Habdil.
Well, kodesh is
Beautiful.
holy, which is-
Holy, right, so holy. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump on you, but I separation on
When I say rest, I don't mean sleep.
You don't mean sleep,
I mean-
right?
A lack
Okay.
of doing the same thing that you do the rest of the week.
What, okay, these are all great answers. Shabbat, yes, I'm putting that word again. What's the first word that comes to you?
I think connection to God.
Thank you. I love all of them. Okay.
I would also say rest.
We say rest, all right, rest wins. You know what, to me,
To me, it's family gathering.
family gathering. I love all of these, and we're gonna kind of put those on the list. But for me, if, in all candor, when I think Shabbat, which at least in my world happens once a week, I think I gotta go shopping and food, meals. Okay, I gotta figure out Shabbat, because it's gotta be done by more or less 5 o'clock on Friday night. And then the segue is then it's rest, because I can't do it after that hour. So it's gotta be finished, but
So-
that's.
so for you, it's work-
list and then-
Work and then rest.
For 2 days. Double the work.
I think the concept that wins it, as it said in Hebrew, is Shabbat Menucha.
Okay.
Rest for Shabbat.
Go here, rest is, rest, and I think what Sheila said is really important, because rest doesn't necessarily mean sleep. Yes, of course.
The Seventh-day Adventists place great emphasis on Sabbath observance, vegetarianism, no smoking, alcohol, and so forth. And they run the Loma Linda University in California, which, and there's a large number of them there, and they are among the longest livers on earth. There are many people there that are beyond 100 years
Okay.
old.
You are right, and I want you to teach a class on it. But it's because. You're totally right. Okay, next word association. Every time you say Shabbat Shalom, what are you saying? For most of the time, full disclosure, I'm saying hi. On Saturday, that's my special hello. I don't put any profound connection in my head every single time I do that. I'm being honest with you. I'm being very pragmatic. But when we think about Shabbat Shalom, I'm gonna only take two quickies. He's got the advantage of being right here. Sets up stuff. So
I think of good Shabbos as a greeting. Shabbat Shalom is peace.
thank you.
I think it'd be better if people could say, make a good Shabbos rather than.
Okay. What is in your, when you say Shabbat Shalom, what are you saying to somebody?
I notice that it's a different day than the rest of the week.
I love that answer. That's not what you say 6 other days. That's not what you say 6 other days. Okay.
Open order.
But let's talk about Shalom. And I think I'm probably preaching to the choir, but we all need reviews. We all need reminders of things. Shalom is kind of, my prior life was as a linguist. I am into words. I know, as many of you know, that translations are limited to the language in which you translate, and they're very seldom conceptual translations. A lot of little translations are poor. But shalom really comes from the root that means
Shalem. From Shalem.
Complete.
Yeah, from Shalem.
completeness, like in the word refuah shlema, absolutely. That's just something I just wanted to remind you of in terms of when you're saying Shabbat Shalom, you're really asking for completeness. And what is completeness? Well, we can say that we are completing the week with this very special day in terms of this cyclical calendar that we have. But it also means that we should be living one day each week as well as we should. And it's Shabbat start, and you mentioned some of these things. Shabbat starts with the idea that we stop the ordinary. We know that we make a Havdalah at the end of Shabbat to go back to the ordinary. Lahavdil is to make a distinction. Okay, we know that we make a distinction at the end, but we are also making, without using the word Havdalah necessarily, we are making a distinction at the beginning that we are entering into this. And for me, it's when I turn off the oven. I'm sorry, I'm so food oriented, but this is a big part of my life. I mean, I will call you on you, but just tell me.
This isn't the only thing, but I'm thinking kiddush at the beginning.
Of course, there are many ways to make this distinction.
Yeah. But
And-
there are
And
multiple-
I'm thinking lighting candles, because that's my work, my beginning of that's making that distinction. But that's really what it is, and Shabbat at the end is a chance to live your life at the best, as best as you can. And everybody needed a rest, even God kind of needed a rest, although I think in this particular case, the way I look at, God did a creation on Shabbat also, he created rest. The concept of rest is a different kind of thing. But how do we remember creation? By not creating. It's a day that's not about productivity. And it actually is kind of a dose of calm and an opportunity for rest and togetherness. V'shamu b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam v'olam. It's the ending of that line is, you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your slave or your ox or your donkey or any of your livestock or the resident aliens in your town. Okay, what does that say? And is there somebody I haven't heard from yet who wants to? It's not just you. Sheila.
Well, if you have everybody, your livestock and all, if everybody is resting, you can rest better. You're watching them, maybe, but you don't have to perform any, you don't have to prepare for them. You don't have to prepare the work for the servant to do. You don't have to milk the cow, although I imagine that they do milk the cow. Yeah, but, all right, but there are certain things you don't have to do. You prepare for them in advance. You prepare the hay in advance so that.
Thank you. Thank you. But I'm going to suggest that you're not doing it only for you, you're doing it for humanity. We are recognizing that rest is something, a virtue, that everyone is entitled to. Anybody who hasn't spoken before I call on my team over here? Okay.
Well, okay, it suggests that, we're all, that there's an equality of dignity and that we are all free on this day to, that the differences are level, the distinctions between class and so forth, that we, for your animal, for your slave, and so on and so forth. So it's suggesting this idea of freedom for everyone.
And I'm gonna say that that makes it more complete, more whole,
Right.
that it's not just one segment that it gets read. Quick, Ron?
I'm gonna counter the
You would.
cessation of creation, because things did continue. Grass continued to grow, animals still did what animals do. Man is supposed to have relations with his wife on Shabbos, so creation did not stop, its work stopped.
Okay, well, we're gonna talk about what the word work means.
Differentiate between work and creation.
Okay, on work, you can lug a pound of potatoes across the living room 50 times on Shabbat. So we're gonna have to talk about what work is a little bit as well. And these are some of the key points that maybe I'd like to share with you right now. So some people think of Shabbat as a day of can'ts. Okay, you can't this, you can't that. But it's also very much a day of can'ts. On Shabbat, by having certain can'ts in place like commerce and cooking, we can make room for things that are essential to making life feel whole and worthwhile that get crowded out by those cans the rest of the week. How? With food, with drink, with nicer clothes, we can make room in our lives for closeness. We can eat, we can drink, we can make love, we can talk, we can visit, we can play games, we can sing, we can read, I said read ready. We can drink, I said drink ready, study, take a walk, reflect, and then we can eat again. That's exhausting. So on Shabbat, it's also when you're doing with this mindset, this wholeness and these kinds of cans, it's difficult to tell a lie or to take revenge or to hurt someone or to be ungrateful. It's easier to speak kindly. It's easier to be loving. And of course, I'm reminded, as are you, of the famous Heschel teaching. wherever you are, no matter where you are, on Shabbat, we can carve out a sanctuary in time. So that makes Shabbat portable, no matter where you are, and doable, no matter where you find yourself. You could be in New York, or New Mexico, or in Iceland.
How about the moon? Never mind.
Yes.
Moon time. Moon time.
Basically, what you can, what you're doing is doing things that you might not have time to do the rest of the week,
Mhm.
like reading. Now, there are people who say, okay, I don't watch television the rest of the week, so I want to watch television. I mean, but the point is that
Right.
a lot of us don't have time to read an enjoyable book. We don't have time to be with family. And this creates, to my mind, it creates a problem because sometimes you just need to call somebody and say, hey, can I come over? Which you can't do on Shabbos. So
I'm gonna go on. I think we got the point, and we're totally in agreement with you, but I want to go on to some newer, perhaps newer ideas or some reviewable ideas kind of thing.
Mhm.
So when and I'm asking you, and this is tough, because I'm kind of doing this because I need this refresher every once in a while, which is to do kind of a self-assessment or performance review of you personally on Shabbat, rather than talk about they or other people. How do you do? And I want to make clear that there's no perfect and there's no right or wrong. Technically, Shabbat is 25 hours long. But if in your world, in your meaning, Shabbat is an hour and a half, but it is Shabbat and it is a start, it is a beautiful thing. You have to work this out for you. I'm not looking for perfection. I think one of the things that makes it hard to do Shabbat in a quality whole Shabbat Shalom way is we have an enemy, and that enemy is us, ourselves. Whenever this comes up, not whenever, in my life, with some regularity, people would say, there are two things. I would love to keep kosher, but, and then they go all the, and I would love to do Shabbat, but. And immediately it's the why nots, the can'ts, as opposed to the can kind of things. You feel like you're chained to obligations, that there's no escape. But it's in our power to do something to escape from those chains. Norm and I have the privilege of having many seriously Shomrim Shabbat people in our family whose lives are incredibly complicated 6 days a week. I can hold family and community obligations and high-powered jobs and such. Yet they are able to compartmentalize. They found a way to you can do it. And all of these excuses about, but I have to get into a good college and I can't not study and those kinds of things. They all got into good colleges, all these kinds of things. I'm not trying to put any kind of feather in our caps. I'm just trying to say that I've observed, as many of you probably have, people who have gotten rid of those excuses and have decided that this is a priority that does work, whatever it is that you decide to become your priority. But there's no, there are things that are absolutely readily available and to be flexible. But what I would suggest you is it's wrong, and I know I'm speaking to the choir here too, but in terms of sharing concept, is that don't think that because you don't do it all, you can't do any of it. That's totally wrong. There is no all. But the mistake, and you can share this with others with whom you might have this conversation, is to absolutely, do nothing. As you can tell, I'm kind of passionate on this. But in terms of some relatively easy, approachable kinds of things to do, yes, men can light Shabbat candles. Okay. For me, that is a transformative moment. For me, it's a moment of kavanah. I have my connection to Hashem in that moment. That is, it doesn't mean it works for everybody, but lighting candles or making kiddush, which are meant to be home rituals. And this isn't judgment about it becoming institutional, because for some people, this is a wonderful opportunity. But you certainly can light a candle at home, no matter who you are. Is one of the things that is kind of a cognitive and a spiritual and a sensory experience that can bring in the Shabbat in a special way to make that Havdil, to make that that
Differentiation.
separation between to start on this plan to have this living life one day as well as we can, better than, as best we can.
I
want
think it's a good example of something that we do tamid that has a great value.
Okay,
Cheryl,
absolutely, yes.
can I interject? I agree with you saying, but the one thing I see, which we're not interjecting, is not so much I can, I can't, or I want, is belief. And then, in other words, you can say, I do have time for this and I can't, but I don't necessarily believe in why it's being done or the importance of this, or, you have to have something behind the wanting. Just because everybody else does it,
I hear you.
and that's because it's in the Torah, that there are a lot of people who do things necessarily don't believe in it, or the other way around. They believe
I
in
hear
it.
you, I hear
but
you.
they-
Let me, if I can address one of the toughest questions there is in Judaism, and I'm not gonna be able to solve it for you, and I apologize in advance for what might sound like a very flip answer. But in Judaism, you do, and then you believe. Or sometimes you do and you end up never believing. But at the end of the day, I can justify this because this is like so many things in Judaism. So many things in Judaism, this is psychologically a sound thing to do, regardless of your belief system. This is a healthy thing to do. This is something that Sheila, I really want to speak right now, I'm sorry. This is something that we're not able to maybe rationalize, but I can, without even being Jewish, a day of rest makes kind of sense. What you're saying is belief. I'm saying there are absolutely people who don't pay attention to the fact that it's a mitzvah, that it's a commandment as such in terms of from Hashem, but they do understand that this is part of what Jews do in terms of their guidebook to how to live a whole life. So like many, and I can tell you again from my experiences in life that there are many Sabbath observant Jews who question God, but they absolutely are Sabbath observing Jews for other reasons, because this is what on a personal level benefits them and on a community level helps them identify. So I don't, if your only motivation is you're going to do this because God told you to, then that puts you in a different category, not a wrong category, but a different one from many, many people. I'm going to call on Sheila briefly and then I'll call on.
What you did, what I,
Just for a
Yes.
second, they are going to be taking on the Torah.
Thank you.
So those that might have readings,
if you don't, what I notice is that, yeah, they may not believe, they tell you they don't believe in Judaism, they don't believe in God, but they form their own rituals.
Okay, I don't want to talk, and I say, I don't want to talk about bays again. I want to talk about us, yeah.
Orthodox, that's not a problem. It's a whole encompassing. I think for conservative people like us, I think it's a much harder because perhaps we'll take on certain mitzvahs, certain ceremonial things. I'm not saying it as a whole day of rest. I've never seen Shabbat as from beginning to end. It's you do different things along the way. And eventually, let's say people decide, I want to light candles. They've never done it their whole life, okay? If eventually it doesn't take on a spiritual or something meaning, they will drop it.
Right, well, they, again, I don't want to talk about they, I want to talk about, I hear you, you're right factually, but it's kind of not the message that I'm trying, and maybe I'm not succeeding, please forgive me. What I'm trying to share is you be introspective about this. You don't have to share anything with me or with anybody else here, but look at this from your point of view in terms of you and being a participant in Shabbat for many, many positive reasons. I want to define, we have very little time left. I want to define two things for you. One is work and one is something about the site that I referenced before. So the first commandment is to not work on Shabbat. 6 days shall thou rest and work, and on the seventh day is Shabbat to the Lord. You shall not do any melacha. Okay, melacha and avodah are two different things. Work. Okay, for the sake of simplicity, what you are not supposed to do on Shabbat is I use the definition creative work, meaning something that results in a permanent change. Melacha for me is a teaching definition, is work that results in changing something permanently, creative work. Okay, and then there's another commandment that says, on the seventh day shall rest. So why do you need a commandment to rest? It seems like that would follow if you're not working. Well, the answer is because rest takes effort. As someone said very early on in this particular thing. It
But
would,
for some people, creating is a form of rest.
okay, I'm speaking. If the Torah tells us not to work, obviously, we would think at first blush that we're gonna get a lot of rest. So why do we need this commandment? The fact that refraining from work is not sufficient to automatically include rest implies that the resting we do on Shabbat, as someone said, has to be something more than putting our feet up or getting a suntan or sipping a cocktail. It takes some preparation, some intention. And if we're going to refrain from work on Shabbat, you need to know that Torah defines work. The rules may surprise you because, as I mentioned before, lugging around a sack of potatoes from room to room on Shabbat is technically permissible. It's not work that is prohibited on Shabbat. Rather, it's a special category of work that refers to, as you know, the 39 types of creative activities that were used to build the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary used by the Jews for 40 years. And these are things like planting and cooking and commerce and writing, okay? Since Shabbat is already, as we spoke about earlier, a sanctuary in time, Shabbat has stability and permanence that transcends the limitation of space. And it's kind of an expense-free vacation from melacha, that creative work. And you don't even need a travel agent. But it's not the simplest kind of definition that we might jump to in terms of work and what work might be. The other thing that I wanted to mention is something that I had said earlier, which is that I have a very strong belief that Jewish practices are very psychologically healthy. And this teaching resonates with me in terms that the answer to every question is Shabbat. So here's how that works. If you ask folks what they're struggling with, almost without fail, the majority of them boil down to something like, how can I have a more meaningful experience with family and friends? How can I balance taking care of myself with all of the work and responsibilities that I have? How can I unplug from the pervasive, intrusive technology? Shabbat is the answer for these things. It takes discipline because we're basically addicted to technology now, and it's understandable. But I know people who are so able to compartmentalize and take away all of their stress for a day that they are going to live a long and healthy life. And I would say, rather than whatever vitamins they're taking or workouts, that Shabbat is a big contributor to that particular thing. And I leave that idea with you. And I am not the perfect observer either. We do well, Norm and I and our family. And I'm not in any way suggesting that my way is your way. I'm just suggesting that you understand that there's a gift that we have that is given in this parsha that is often not talked about because the calf takes all the time away and the steam away from this. And I just wanted to put this in the forefront as something for us to relate to and take home. So, and I'm sorry I cut you off, but I'm passionate about this and that was my time. And we have 1 minute. If anybody wants to say anything, I'm absolutely.
Always have something.
Oh, Ron always has something to say.
I'm gonna say that malacha as opposed to avodah. Malacha to me is the things you normally do for your occupation. And which means that since the only occupation these people had in the desert, they were the 39 things that they had to do to build the Mishkan. That's why, and that's where that came from. But since I don't do those 39 things, I do these 48 over here. Those are the 48 I have to stop. If I happen to do one of these things for the Mishkan, that's perfectly okay, if it's not one of my 48. And you can't say cease avodah, because avodah also means worship.
Okay, I know, you can't. You can
Yeah.
say, it, you have to understand how you're saying it, I hear you. What Ron is saying is that basically Torah lo b'shamayim, we have to live Torah for ourselves and our world today, and this works for him. Jerry, okay, and then I can.
Yeah, we speak often about Shabbat in terms of physicality. There's also an aesthetics aspect to it. So for me, the beauty of music is found in the rest notes. The beauty of the world of creation is found in cessation also. So we can appreciate those other 6 days when we're quiet on Shabbat, just like in music, we appreciate those magnificent horns when there's a pause right before them.
I skipped the part about sensory things, whether the smelling of the challah, whether it's mirot, whether it's all of these sensory things are extremely important to making a beautiful, special day. Yes, please.
For me personally, and Larry probably too, I find that I separate Shabbat and that I look forward to it. And it's kind of the culmination of the week. And I also have found that when I'm struggling with issues, problems, things really pressing, I let go of them. So for Shabbat, for me, is a letting go and embracing family, friends, challah. I started making my own challah a number of years ago, and now I can't stop doing it. But it definitely gives me that feeling.
And I'm feeling from everyone, this thing that is hard to describe in words, it is very important. But I'm also going to tell you that the Shabbat observance is a major indicator of Jewish continuity. There is absolute documentation that in a family where Shabbat was observed 2 generations later, there's a high probability that those descendants will be identifying Jews. And where Shabbat was never observed 2 generations later, there is very feeble or no identity of the Jewish community. Okay, so
Interesting.
and I see that. And observe is got flexibility what that means, but it is a special day. A havdil is made. Let's make a havdil and go into the synagogue, into the show. Okay, thank you. It's so tough, but.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
And bye-bye.